The Planning Applications Committee. My name is Councillor Anne Siren and I'm the Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I will be chairing this committee meeting tonight. For those of you who do not attend this meeting regularly, please may I introduce my councillor colleagues here on my right, and we will be making the decisions on the applications in front of us this evening. To my left are our council officers who will be offering us professional advice and presenting the cases, and we may ask questions of them. So, turning to the agenda, are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. There are no apologies for absence have been received.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest?
One of the applications is in my ward, but I haven't had any discussions with anyone about it.
Thank you, Councillor. And are there any other declarations? Are there any minutes of previous meetings to be signed off?
No, Chair, there are no additional minutes to be signed.
Great. So we will kick off then with the agenda. So the running order for tonight will be, as is on the speakers list, which you should hopefully have got a copy of when you arrived. We do have a long agenda today, so I'm sorry, we have quite a lot of speakers. So I'm sorry if you're going to be waiting for an application that's sort of third or fourth, but we'll try and keep things moving. At the appropriate point, I will ask the objectors or the supporter and applicant to speak to the committee, and each objector or supporter will have a total of 3 minutes. And where there is a councillor, actually I think there's just one councillor, but no other objector, so that will be 3 minutes. And then the committee may ask questions of you, and these are we can't have any other discussion other than through these formal mechanisms. So we will start with 5 Ladbroke Terrace. Please, Ms. Ray.
Thank you. So this application seeks planning permission for the construction of additional means of enclosure for an electric fence at the front of the property. So turning to the images, here is an aerial view of the site just to show it in context, and perhaps more helpfully the site photographs. As existing, this kind of electric fence treatment sits on top of the boundary wall to a higher position than what is proposed within the application. They are seeking to reduce it but still get retrospective permission for something above there. This is the existing and proposed garden plan that just shows the extent of the electric fence in kind of that orangey red colour. These are the existing elevations showing the height of it above the wall. Probably the top image is best to illustrate that. And the proposed showing what they are proposing now in terms of what they wish to retain. Officers are recommending approval, and after the speakers would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
So we will call first our objector, which is Councillor Gardner. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
As called councillor, I asked for this to come before the committee for 3 reasons. First being whether we as a council wish to allow premises to put up electric fences and make themselves into little fortresses. Secondly, why an application for an electric fence in a conservation area is seen as beneficial in terms of enhancing the amenity or conservation area. And thirdly, if you are minded to grant it because of specific circumstances, why it shouldn't be personal to the applicant. This electric fencing will in essence make this site like a fortress, with locked gates, locked driveway gates, and now an electric fence around its perimeter. How unwelcoming is this? Are we as a council really wanting to approve mini fortresses and set a precedent for this? Here's a quote from the public objection of a neighbour. Quotes, "The retrospective application seems to be only for the front of the house, when the electric fence goes all around the entire perimeter of the site, including the garages, sides and rear of the garden, and fronting the entire length of 61 Ladbroke Road. It is very unsightly, so I'm not against the theory of it, just the look of it, as it looks like we are next door to a prison." End of quote. It is both Aesthetically unappealing, the rows of wiring and the yellow tags are unsightly and harmful to the character and appearance of the building and the conservation area. It runs contrary to CD 10, 4 and 2 of our local plan, requiring the highest standards of urban design and architectural quality to improve the local area or its character. CD 9D specifically states no harmful increase in the size of the enclosure to existing buildings and spaces neighbouring gardens, balconies and terrace, yet this is exactly what it does, prison-like. Even the officer's report identifies in paragraph 6.6 that the electric fencing is noticeable and has a harmful impact on the character and appearance of the building, and in paragraph 6.7 that its design is not of exceptional or high quality, and that the yellow signage tags add visual clutter. The officer says that this is, on balance, a recommendation, but I counter that it should not be allowed as it does nothing to enhance and arguably detracts from the conservation area, and as you heard from a neighbour, they describe it as living next to a prison. I have had countless residents who've seen the electric fencing from the street ask me why it's allowed, and as a result I asked enforcement officers to look at this and hence this planning application. I strongly urge this committee to refuse it. However, if you are minded to grant it, then it should only be personal to the application, along with a condition that the electric fence is properly maintained and serviced and complies with all relevant safety legislation. I would, however, argue that I think this committee should refuse it entirely. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will hear from the applicant and the agent. Where are you? Please introduce yourself, and whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Paul. I'm the agent for this application. It seems there are 4 main strands to the application and subsequent objections to it. So I'd like to go through those. Firstly, it's the extent of the issue that this is trying to counter, and that is foxes kind of being a problem within this resident's garden. I've worked on this house for over a decade through its redevelopment and occupation by previous owners, so I've got direct experience of just how bad the fox problem they've had at this site is. I think likely because of its proximity to the rear of kind of the shops and restaurants of Notting Hill Gate, and the fact it is a large, quiet garden. The current homeowner has an extreme phobia of foxes, and with a young child and puppy, this has become a serious welfare and quality of life issue for them. The foxes are brazen and have even entered neighbours' houses. Before installing the fence, every alternative was exhausted. Ultrasound emitters, clicking devices, motion lights, professional baited traps, chili powder, garlic, human urine. Nothing worked. The electric fence is a last resort and more humane than trapping and killing these foxes. Secondly, the visual impact. The revised design has minimised this visual impact, reducing the height along the party fence wall to just a single discrete wire. This will be the only element that's visible. Elsewhere, the fencing sits behind planting, concealed from view. Both adjoining neighbours are generally supportive of this and the reduction of the visual appearance of it, because it has reduced the fox activity in their gardens also. Thirdly, safety concerns. While your officer notes this falls under other regulatory regimes, I can confirm the system is a plug-and-play kit complying with the relevant British standard. Importantly, it's a low-power system emitting only 1.2 joule pulses, specifically calibrated for deterring small animals like foxes. This is well below the 5 joule safety limit set by the British standard and at the lower end of the range recommended for small animals. This substantially reduces any risk to the public. Among the hundreds of thousands of miles of electric fencing across the UK public rights-of-way, I can find little to no evidence of injuries being caused by correctly installed and maintained systems. Nonetheless, the homeowners work in insurance and have full public liability cover. Fourthly, precedent. It's well established that each planning application must be determined on its own merits. This application should be judged on the visual impact of it being just a single wire, as any other subsequent application should be judged on its merits, still with the opportunity to refuse permission. I would also argue that this is an extreme case. Most homeowners face lesser issues with foxes and do not have such an extreme phobia, so would not go to such lengths. Any concerns about an influx of electric fence applications is speculative, and I would be surprised to see it materialise. With that being said, the homeowners would be happy for this and any future approval to be personal, but I understand from the case officer that this isn't possible. On the fences installed at the rear of the property, we've been in communication with enforcement and case officer, and we will submit further applications based on the outcome of this one. This is now a modest solution to an exceptional problem at this specific site. Visual impact has been minimised and the system meets all required safety standards. I would respectfully ask that the committee to accept the officer's recommendation for approval and grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions. So I'll start with a question to you, Mr. Jackson. You said that there's going to be more applications. Can you tell us why you haven't included all of the fences within the first application? Because it would have been helpful to see them all together.
We have treated them as separate. We wanted to explore what the kind of acceptable solution was with the council to start with on this one at the front, which was the initial, which was subject to the initial enforcement action, and then from that we will, and the homeowners are happy to amend and adjust how it appears and try and conceal it and make it less visually apparent at the rear. But we wanted to have that dialogue with this first application, and then we will submit the one at the rear and amend the fencing accordingly.
So just so everybody here is clear, which are included in this application? How many are there, which are included, and which ones are not included?
This application covers fencing around the front boundaries. So there was a plan presented. It has a single wire on top of the party fence wall between number 5 and number 4 on the right-hand side of that plan. And then we have fencing that sits behind hedging in board of the garden that runs around the left-hand side of the gate and the boundary with number 6 on the left-hand side.
Thank you. Questions, committee? Councillor Idris.
In your response to Councillor Siren, I guess you're testing the waters. You want to see where we are as a council with these electric fences.
Correct. The initial enforcement action only related to the fences at the front of the property. So we immediately put together this application and submitted in response to that. See, then there has been further conversation about the fences at the rear and on top of the garage, and it felt like there was no sense in putting together another application until we'd got to the end of this one, agreed what was acceptable, and then we will amend the fencing at the rear and submit an application to cover that.
My question is, will this electricity actually designed to kill the animal that jumps on it?
No, it's
going to do?
Designed as a deterrent. It's a like millisecond pulse that is a shock.
It's like a taser?
Much less than that. It's very minor. The British standard limits kind of safe fencing at 5 joules. This one runs at 1.2, so a fifth of what it could be, just over a fifth of what it could be. It's the level calibrated for kind of small animals.
If you put your hand on the fence, what happens to you?
You would feel a very momentary shock.
Yeah.
But this is far less of a shock than a 5 joule fence, which is still deemed safe and is what kind of would enclose cattle. So is that designed
for foxes?
This is.
How will it affect cats, for instance?
They would get a shock as well.
And will the shock kill them?
No, none of these. Even the 5 joule shock would not kill even a cat. They're designed to be a deterrent, not harmful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Question to the objector. Sorry, apologies. Question to the applicant. I understand fence might be just a British standard to install. Did you explore any other options where it doesn't really affect the aesthetics or the fabric of the wall, because you might have something like the walls on the brick itself rather than the actual fence, because that even deter foxes, regardless if they jump.
If you have what on the brick, sorry?
No. What I'm saying, the fence as a metal stance where it wired together, because that would sort of there's a in terms of the fabric or the aesthetics of the building, there is a negative impact in terms of visual looking. But did you not explore any other options where it doesn't appear from outside or?
They've explored every other avenue of kind of fox and pest deterrent that is kind of readily commercially available, that is suggested online. In terms of other forms of fencing, I think we all know foxes are quite persistent and clever, that without that shock element, they were still getting into the house, getting into the garden. So that this has been the only thing that has stopped them.
Thank you. Another question for the applicant. Looking at the pictures of the fencing, it's straight up and looks rather intrusive. Have you ever considered putting them at an angle towards the inside of the garden so that they become less visible?
I think the pictures that are accompanying this are how it is installed as current. So there are 5 wires, I think, above the top of the wall. What we're proposing is to reduce that to just a single wire that sits on top of the wall. I think the problem is, yes, there might be an idea that we could mount that on the inside face of the wall, but the problem is if the fox is then already on top of the wall, they can just jump over that. So I think it needs to be on top of the wall so that as they jump onto that surface, they get the shock and jump back off again. So that, I mean, there is an acceptance from the homeowner that there is a visual impact to the conservation area of the fencing as installed, and we are looking. The problem with that wall is there is no opportunity, because it's directly adjacent to the driveway, no opportunity to kind of bring it in board of the boundary and hide it behind planting, like we have done with the rest of the boundary at the front, where it's not visible from the street, and hopefully there isn't as big a concern with it.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chair. A question for the objector, if I may, Councillor Gardner. The applicant says that the motive for this application is purely to deter foxes. Do you believe that? And if you don't, do you have any idea what other motivations could be behind this? Thanks.
Thank you. Other than what I've read in the papers about in the application in terms of fox deterrent, if you actually take it to a step further, if everybody wants to stop animals from getting in their garden, where eventually will the animals be allowed? So I think there is a if everybody then copies this and it becomes precedent, then frankly, you kind of go, it is part of urban living and urban life these days. Whilst I do sympathise, I also kind of go, this really benefits one person or one family. It doesn't benefit the area or other residents and neighbours.
Councillor Rutty.
Thanks, Chair. Following on my previous question, to the applicant. I understand it works as a deterrent to stop foxes. However, if you look at the main gate, which is the black one, there's no guarantee that the foxes won't come through the gate, either through jumping or, coming through those grills. What guarantee would? I mean, there's no guarantee that the foxes would still be, deterred in that sense. Thank you.
They're obviously wild animals, so there is no guarantee, and they may still find routes, but I think the routes that they have historically taken have been over the boundary walls. I think that the gate is quite tall and it's got a spiked top, and it's not a finialed top. It's not got too much kind of horizontal rungs to allow them to climb onto. So all I can say is that the homeowners have found that whilst this version of the fence that they accept is not acceptable, has been installed, they have had a drastic reduction in the kind of incursion of foxes into their gardens. So they would like to retain it, to retain that. I think on the previous point, it is only about foxes. They do not want, ideally, they don't want this electric fence. That's why they tried every other means of keeping them out. And it is because they have an extreme phobia. It's not a normal person's reaction to the foxes.
Okay, I think we'll move on to questions to Officer. Who would like to start? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, one of them is, do we have any other properties in the borough with electric fences that you know of?
Not that I know of, I'm afraid.
So this is the first?
The first that I know of.
Okay, my second question is, aren't we concerned that going forward, this is going to set a precedent where people are going to wire their houses so foxes don't come in, maybe intruders don't come in? Isn't there a concern that this is a little bit too far?
I think for the purposes of planning, we have to assess each case on its merits in line with the local plan. So you'd have to look at the particular site circumstances before you conclude whether there's harm or not. That's how I would approach it. So if there was another application down this particular street, you'd want to give weight to any decision that's made here. And that could influence it. It could influence it to say, well, it's similar and we have no concerns, or it could influence it that it's creating a trend that's harmful. But for the purposes of this particular application, I think the reduced height in the fencing and the kind of transparent feel we believe it has at that reduced height, on balance, we're recommending approval.
Councillor Oretti.
Thanks, Fiona. Just checking on the policy-wise, is there any clause within our local plan or policy where either we object or we promote this kind of structures, or if there's another term for it? Thank you.
There's nothing about kind of electric fences or anything like that. Means of enclosures and boundary treatments and that kind of thing we would assess against the kind of context and character policies such as CD1, CD2. I think we've have referred to those within paragraph 5.1 of our report. And because it's in a conservation area, we would be looking at CD4 as well. So it would engage all of those policies, and I think about the overall visual impact on the building, the boundary treatments and the wider conservation area.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up, as suggested by the objector, Councillor Gardner, if you apply a condition, would that be sort of, I wouldn't say enforceable, would that be a condition to apply only on the personal reasons? Would that then limit to one, as in this application, as opposed to when it sets precedent to future ones? Then is there a way we can defend, or the councillor or the planning committee can defend? Or thanks.
I think that's a really good question, because officers haven't recommended it to be personal because we've taken a view on it as it is. If members conclude that there is harm and you're concerned about the appearance, but you think there are conditions that could manage or sort of outweigh that harm, and that condition is a personal permission, meaning it won't be a long-term permanent solution at the site, that would definitely carry weight in any future decision applications that come forward for similar things. So that's within your gift to do so. A personal permission that you think, if you think that condition meets the tests, you definitely can make that decision.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So also, just so we're very clear about what's being asked for here, it's not the picture that was put up on the screen. How much less of it is there going to be? I mean, I think there was a mention of one wire.
I'll just refer back to the plans, because I think it's the best way of looking at it is the top drawing there. That's the height of the fencing as it is now, because it's quite difficult to see on that photograph. And then it's being reduced down to kind of I would describe it more as one rung. You've got a few there that build up. So the height is being significantly reduced, but still sits atop that wall in the same location.
Okay. I also wanted to ask if public safety could be a planning consideration. So I guess what I'm kind of getting at here, I've listened to, the amount of the shock but, if somebody's walking past this building with an umbrella and they touch this thing, I mean, look, I just don't know enough about this subject, but I feel it's not very safe. I mean, I feel like the police wouldn't particularly like it because if they're trying to, run after a burglar or what have you with cats, we're going to have maimed animals walking around. I mean, there's all sorts of additional things that I can see are not really planning considerations. But so I just wanted to ask, can public safety ever be a planning consideration?
That's another good question. So in this case, we don't think it is a planning consideration because there's other legislation that would deal with that. I mean, we've heard about it. I'm no expert. I couldn't tell you the exact health and safety requirements or limits or so on, but there's other legislation that deals with that. Public safety more generally can be a planning consideration, diversion or measures that are taken to reduce terrorism in placemaking. On a bigger scale, it absolutely is a consideration, and planning looks at that. But for this particular application, we've really thought about it, and we think it falls to other legislation here outside of planning.
Okay. I mean, the thing with the double rung, which you just showed, I mean, it's still quite visible, I think, and I completely get that people have phobias about foxes and probably all sorts of other things, but actually I think the neighbour said that this makes them, it's not a good thing to be looking at, right? I mean, I think we can all agree that we don't really want to be looking at prison-style fencing in the borough, so is there anything else that can be done to reduce the look of this? Because I think at the moment it feels, it doesn't preserve the conservation area. To me, there is harm. And I'm also, given the fact that enforcement have decided that it's something that they want to investigate, that also suggests to me that they think there's something that's harmful about it. Because enforcement doesn't have to take those steps, right? They only take those steps if they think something is harmful. Is that right?
Not quite with enforcement. So enforcement, we receive complaints from different people, residents, councillors, officers, as we're going around the borough, and they take those and investigate them. And in most cases, if there is an interest, there is then a public interest in inviting a planning application. So they do have the power to just close the case and say it's not expedient to do that. But when it's something like this, when there's clear resident interest, clear councillor interest, we would never close the case. We would invite an application and get it assessed by members.
Okay, so going back to the sort of first question that I had, which is, it's still visible. Is there anything that can be done to reduce how visible it is? Because I'm just struggling to understand how it preserves the conservation area if it is so visible, because it's not adding anything. It's making it unpleasant. I think some people would find that very unpleasant, and they wouldn't think that it preserves the conservation area.
And the application that's before you is for this. So unless there's a condition that you could think of that meets the tests that you think would reduce that harm, to be honest, I can't think of one. I can't suggest one. I wouldn't want to say anything about soft landscaping that could have other problems. I don't know how you'd even do it. So I think listening to your concerns, it is about the character and appearance, that it doesn't preserve the conservation area, and that fortress-like feel. So but I don't have a solution for you with a condition, I'm afraid.
I guess what I'm sort of also wondering is why officers feel that it does preserve the conservation area. Why are you recommending it for approval when it's not adding anything?
I think we've dealt with it within the report, paragraphs 6.4 to 6.9, to try and explain our kind of considerations in terms of the policy context and the conservation area appraisal. And we've said it's not exceptional or high quality necessarily, but the way it's been reduced in height and sits atop the boundary wall, for us it's not so dominant as to take away from that existing means of enclosure, and it's not the thing that we believe draws your eye as you walk past the site in the same way. But members can come to a different conclusion.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Any questions for Fiona? Any more questions? Any thought? Well, Councillor Lane.
Sorry, just a quick one. We've talked quite a bit about the fence, but not the warning notices that are also proposed to be placed on it. I'm assuming they'll be sort of in bright colours, you know, sort of yellow, red. I'll make clear that there's an electric fence. In a conservation area, do we have precedent of these warning notices being installed on other residential dwellings? And in a conservation area with sort of predominantly, you know, classical Victorian villas, you know, my initial impression is that that sort of would look out of place and harm the appearance. But if we do have other houses in the area with these on, it'd be useful to know about them. Do you know of any?
Not in relation to electric fencing. We see them for like CCTV cameras and things like that, small yellow signs. It's difficult to see on those photos, unfortunately, but you can see small yellow signs attached to it. The actual signs themselves wouldn't require advertisement consent, so it doesn't fall within that part of the legislation for planning. But I think it's part of the structure that's up there at the moment. So we would, if the resolution was to refuse, that would form part of our you know, instructions going forward.
Okay, committee, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a slippery slope. It's unneighborly, and I am not convinced it's not adding anything to the area, and I absolutely don't see a way of accepting this.
Yeah, in addition to Councillor Idris, I think, yes, you heard from the applicant about the phobia. I'm sorry for the resident having that phobia. However, there's no guarantee, regardless of installing the fence, there's no guarantee that she might ever see a fox, whether coming through the mini gates or maybe jump from the car, you know. If they're so intelligent, they would avoid the fences and then come through another area. And then she might, regardless, she might end up not seeing the fox. However, she might also could end up seeing the fox. That would create an impression. So I'm sorry, I'm not convinced with.
Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts? Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have to look at the test under CD10 and whether this alteration harms existing character and appearance of the conservation area. I think in a historic conservation area with predominantly neoclassical Victorian villas and an electric fence with a load of warning signs on, I don't think meets that test under CD10, so I'm minded to refuse for that reason.
Yeah, Councillor Verboven, tell us your
I'm
thoughts.
thinking along the same lines, and also the fencing might be working now, but in the end we have 5 lines, electric lines now. We're reducing it to 1. There is a question about, is it going to be as effective if it's just 1 line? I was thinking potentially different angles, but I just don't see it working in the real circumstances.
And I have to say, I agree with everything that you've all said. I think this really is harmful to the character and appearance and the feeling that it gives to our residents. I don't think it's something that we want, and I don't think it adds anything. And I'm really sorry about the phobia. But then I think also people have phobias about something that looks like a prison. I mean, you know, we all have to try and live here together. So are we ready to take a vote? It feels like we are. So the recommendation from officers is to approve this application. Can those in favour please show? And can those against please raise their hands? Thank you. So that is
So I think you'd need a proposer and a seconder, but I can probably give you some wording just listening to you on the reason for refusal. Would be the proposed electric fencing by reason of its design, height and prominent siting would read as unwelcoming and result in the fortification of the property within the street scene, failing to preserve or enhance the Ladbroke Conservation Area, and then refer to the relevant policies. So if you propose and second, if you're happy with that.
That works for me. Who would like to propose? Councillor Will to propose, and seconder, Councillor Oretti. So the proposal is to refuse the application. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that is refused. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move straight on to Camden Hill Mansions. Ms. Ray, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So this application is for a large roof light above flat 19 in Camden Hill Mansions. At first there's an aerial image on the screen for you showing the building, and it's just behind this chimney stack. If you can see my cursor, I don't know if you can, next to the grey sloping roof. That's the siting of the proposed roof light. And you can see it better on this proposed plan with the application flat outlined in red. There are 3 other smaller roof lights existing on the roof of the building. The proposed elevations and sections show that it's set underneath the parapet walls, which officers refer to as making it more difficult to see. We are recommending approval for the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So may we please hear from our objector first? Please introduce yourself, and whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, councillors. My name is Kaval Majid. I'm a director of Camden Hill Mansions, the freehold company that owns Camden Hill Mansions. I have the rest of the directors of the board on the line with me. They send their apologies and unable to join us in person this afternoon. We have actually been communicating our objections to this proposal to the owner of Flat 19 for some time now, and I will go through our various timeline and our grounds for objections to this particular proposal. The building has suffered from previously unlicensed works in the building that have actually compromised the structural integrity of the building. If the officer wouldn't mind going back to the aerial elevation, I can point out exactly where there are structural problems. You'll see that there is the gray area, but the wall next to it, right in that white wall, is where there are actual cracks in the building that we've had our own surveyor review and examine. These cracks in the building are actually causing damp and cracks within flat walls in the stack of flats that sit below flat 19. Many of us that own and reside in Camden Hill Mansions previously filed objections to this particular application, so we were quite surprised to see that the recommendation is to still approve it. We have also communicated to Mr. Holm and to the owner of Flat 19 that this work needs to be put on hold until we are able to secure the structural integrity of the building, which we are in process of doing. We are currently having a Section 20 notice issued to all leaseholders of Camden Hill Mansions so that scaffolding can be erected at that rear elevation of the building to repair the cracks that's causing damp and cracks within flats of other buildings within the other flats within the building. Additionally, I'd like to raise that the freehold company's consent will be required for this particular type of works, and the company is not prepared to grant that consent at this time. We have communicated this message to the owner of Flat 19 many times. However, our position has gone unheeded, and we are here today, which I feel is frankly a bit of a waste of this council's time. Including my own and with my fellow directors who are abroad dialing in at the moment. I'd additionally like to add that the proposal to add a skylight to the roof could potentially further compromise the structural integrity of the building. We have recently had the roof of the building repaired. It is currently under guarantee. If any such further structural repairs that are necessarily going to compromise the works that have been done to repair the roof are done, that is something that we just cannot allow right now until, like I've mentioned, the structural integrity of the building is secure. I think this is also a point of setting a dangerous precedent where if, for example, any other person would like to just install a roof skylight or change the structural layout of their flats in KNC. This is a mansion block. It's been on site since 1903. We have to be very, very mindful about the character of the building and making sure that it remains structurally sound. And the freehold company's recommendation is to please deny this application. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we'll turn to Mr. Hume. Whenever you're ready, please introduce yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Ian Hume, I'm the agent. Okay, so the application is for a fixed skylight within the roof over the 5th floor apartment, which is apartment 19. It is effectively the reinstatement of a previously granted application, which is PP 1707332. The installation of a skylight within a flat roof is a procedure which is usual within the construct of building techniques. The appraisal would need to be an understanding of the structural understanding of the roof itself, a set of full structural proposals put together that are submitted to the managing agents, that are then evaluated by the managing agents, and then wrapped up within a license to alter prior to any works proceeding. There's a process to this, and it's a process that we have observed. During this application process, we reached out to try and find the directors to submit our proposals to them prior to submitting for the application process. We also reached out to the managing agents and submitted our proposals to them prior to submitting, and we've issued notification to every person within the block advising them that there was an application coming. We haven't heard anything back. I've heard from another person within the block that they weren't happy about the proposals, but nothing about the existing state and condition. The only other part to say is that the previous application was granted in 2017, proceeded in 2019, to the point where there was an investigation into the structure of the roof, a full set of structural proposals, and a license to alter with the then managing agents, who were Dorrington Residential, compiled by Wedlake Bell Solicitors and wrapped up into a full license to alter, which didn't then proceed. So this is the same application, and this is the same roof light being proposed for the roof. And the final bit is just to say that the previous application in the summation to the proposals stated that it was modest in scale, not visible from any vantage point, and that it preserved the character and appearance of the conservation area and the appearance of the building, and no harm was brought to any of the living conditions of the neighbouring properties. That's my...
Thank you very much. Committee questions. Councillor Idris.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the
agent.
The agent, sorry. The application that lapsed.
Yes.
Why wasn't it executed?
I think at the time, I wasn't involved at the time. We picked this up subsequently. Yeah. We picked it up because we've successfully carried out other works within the property, which were structural works that required the same level of integration with the license to alter, etc., etc.
Okay.
So it was just purely that at that stage he didn't want to proceed, and now is seeking to proceed.
All right, thank you. My question to the objector. You do know, as a freeholder, and I think officers can correct me, you do have the right to refuse the work to go. So you can use this power if you're really concerned that there is a serious breach. There's going to be a big problem with your the structure of the building.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for that. The issue that we have had as a freehold company, we're not trying to say no, that you may not do this whatsoever. The issue really does remain that the works cannot be completed in this flat until we, as the freehold company, have discharged our obligations under the leases to maintain the structural integrity of the building. The issue remains is that the cracks that have appeared in the building are on exactly that side of the building that where flat 19 is, and the stack of flats immediately below it. There is, like I mentioned, previously unlicensed works that have proceeded, which we just don't want to set any expectations of the owners to say that just because you have planning permission that the freehold company will be able to consent to these works as well. It's a matter of timing and making sure that our building is secure so that any works that are being proposed can be taken in the proper way at the appropriate time. But for now, I appreciate what you're saying, and that will be the company's position if the license to alter is presented with prior to the completion of the proposed works that we need to carry out. Thank you.
Councillor Oretti.
Thank you, Chair. Question to the objector. As you pointed out, if you all agree on the civil matter where, if your obligations have been satisfied with the applicant or not satisfied, then obviously you have the sole right to object, and it would be a civil matter regardless of they acquiring the planning application. And you can also obviously have a conversation and have a mitigation plan with the structural issues that you have, and as long as they agree, then you can give your consent as a freeholder. That's always a clause. I mean, that's not stopping, regardless they achieve the planning application.
That's understood. However, I mean, I appreciate, Mr. Holmes, you said that you've tried to deliver plans or otherwise to us, which we as a freehold company have not received, and I will look into that. However, we need to have our own structural surveyor examine what the proposal is, independent of anything that Mr. Holmes is proposing or what the council's officers have reviewed. We have not seen anything other than what I've actually myself as a director taken the initiative to look at the proposals on the council's website. I find that to be a really, really difficult position for me to be in, where I've now had to attend the council's chambers to object to this because there is a lack of communication. We don't know what's going on. At the end of the day, what our structural surveyor may or may not find, because our structural surveyor has only been able to examine the building from the naked eye and some photographs until they actually start the works and scaffolding is erected and we actually see what the extent of the damage is and that flats have all been repaired. We don't know how long it might take to carry out our works. What happens if the planning permission lapses? It lapsed last time. I know it lasts for a period of time. I'm not sure, so forgive me. I don't know what those regulations and council rules are. But at the end of the day, I don't believe that it's prudent for such planning permission that is going to be compromising the roof of our building to be granted by the council. It sets bad precedent, and like you said, the company will not be granting its consent at this time. I just think it's inconsistent for the council to turn around and say that we'll grant this permission. That creates a grounds for us being unreasonable, although we will be able to back that up.
I heard your answer. Thank you. I understand.
I think that the problem here is that this is a planning application. This is not about whether you've given approval, and in fact we're not concerned about that. And I think it's just all really unfortunate, this whole situation. So I would really encourage you to sit down and try and work out the problems that you're having, but, and you know, I'm sorry about the cracks, and anyway, we're not here to talk about those. We're here to think about the planning application. And, you know, truthfully, from what I can see, these roof lights are a common feature in mansion blocks. This one is really not going to be very visible, and it's had permission before, which is a, you know, a consideration. It's very difficult for us to refuse it, because what will happen is it will go to appeal, and the inspector quite rightly will give costs against us, because they'll say, you know, we're here to interpret the planning rules and the planning policies, and even though I'm sure we all have sympathy with this really unfortunate situation, we can't, that's not a consideration for us, if that makes sense. So you know, I'm looking at it thinking there is nothing from a planning point of view that means we can refuse it. If they go ahead and do it without your permission, I think there's a whole different way for you to enforce your rights, which is not here. But, I mean, I'd rather we weren't in this situation, but I can't see any way that we would refuse it, because I think it's perfectly acceptable. That's what I think. Anyone else want to comment? No. Any questions to Fiona? Councillor Verbeek.
How different is the current application from the previous one that was approved?
It's very, very similar. All it is that the roof light is set slightly closer to the chimney stack on the back face rather than within the site, but very similar in terms of size, width, and projection above the flat roof.
So for us coming to a different conclusion, then the conclusion that was drawn at the time is almost impossible, basically.
Yeah, I'd give significant weight to that decision. That's my recommendation.
I mean, look, committee, it's a normal feature of these types of it's really not very visible other than from the roof. And you know, I think, as I said, it's very unfortunate, and I have sympathy with, you know, the time and effort and your frustrations, but I think we have to draw this to a conclusion and take a vote, and the recommendation is to approve this planning application. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. And I would really encourage you to, the application is approved, I'd really encourage you to have a dialogue and try and sort this out, difficult as I'm sure it is, but I think from a planning perspective it's acceptable. Thank you. We will move straight on, please, to 55 Hillgate Place. Ms. Ray, there's no speaker for the applicant and the agent. Just to check, we're okay with that?
Yes, they didn't register within the required time, so it's just the objector supporter, the objector.
It's okay to
speaking.
Just have, okay, so we will start with your presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for waiting as well. I know it's time, but thank you for bearing with us.
Yeah, so just draw members' attention to the addendum report and the additional objections received that have been sent to you. But turning to the slides, here is an aerial view of the site at number 55 Hillgate Place. And here are some elevation drawings that are also included in your pack, because they're not the best size. But you can see the application comprises two separate structures as part of that rear extension they're seeking permission for, one directly behind the closet wing and one as an infill adjacent to the closet wing. So you can see the two images there, existing and proposed, and this is the existing and proposed but side elevation. Here are some section drawings showing that layout and arrangement, and just identifying the fact that there is an existing lower ground floor. And here's a proposed plan, which I think is helpful just to show that closet wing extension. You can see that outline dashed in, and there's the infill area adjacent to it, 3 metres deep, and then another extension housing a toilet room just off the back with a overall depth of just over 2 metres. Some site photographs, because it is quite difficult to see the arrangements there. So this is a view looking over towards the neighbour's closet wing. In the centre, you've got a view looking out of kind of the area of where the infill is proposed, looking back towards Kensington Place. And then there's another view of the similar to the one on the left. And then looking back across the site to like the side wall. So that's where the area for the new toilet is proposed. And then one looking back into that area where the infill is proposed. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll have questions. Can we please invite our objector, Dr. Amini? Please introduce yourself to the committee, and then you have 3 minutes to tell us your objections.
Yes, my name is Dr. Hussein Amini. I'm the owner of 37 Kensington Place. This statement's been prepared jointly by the houses of 37 and 36 Kensington Place and 57 Hillgate Place. First and foremost, I want to draw the committee's attention to an important point, that the proposal is seeking approval as a single-storey extension. However, this isn't, strictly speaking, correct. 55 Hillgate Place already has a total single-storey lower ground floor extension, approved in 2008 and built up to all 3 boundary walls. The gardens have been entirely removed and replaced by a raised garden terrace at the ground floor level. The current proposal, in fact, seeks approval for 2 additional separate second-storey structures built above the existing single-storey extension, creating 2 double-storey masses right to the boundary wall, which has no precedent. The application was validated despite missing the required contextual elevations. Without these, the relationship to neighbouring properties can't be properly assessed. 6 essential documents are also missing against the RBKC Validation List 2023, the Design Access Statement, Heritage Statement, the Contextual and Roof Plans, Environmental Health Hazard Plan, Lighting Report. None of those exist in the officer's report from what we saw. The submitted drawings are an insufficient scale, being 1 in 100, not 125 or 50, contradict one another and present inconsistent dimensions. The Fire Hazard RES also fails to include the boundary walls and therefore questions how that can be compliant. For a valid decision, the committee must rely on accurate, validated plans supported by evidence-based assessment, especially for a proposal in the conservation area of the Hillgate Village. The proposal extends well beyond the established rear building line, eroding the stepped Victorian rhythm and the open green corridor characteristic of Hillgate Place and Kensington Place. Although this breach of policy CD13 is acknowledged in the report, approval is recommended on balance, which directly contradicts, in our view, the RBKC Conservation Area Appraisal 2017, which warns that even the small gaps between and around buildings are vital to the area's character, and the Townscape Gaps Map identifies these spaces as visual breathing spaces. This proposal with 2 second structures and beyond the building line removes that green open space entirely. The further raised terraced height reduces boundary wall to 1.5 meters, enabling direct and expansive sightlines into the 3 adjoining gardens. And the proposed second-story side infill, a glazed dining space, sits less than 2.5 meters from the rear boundary. The boundary wall height is only 1.5 meters, and this proximity and short height to the boundary result in very short and frequent sightings, meaning direct and continuous overlooking. Any average height person will be able to see across constantly and clearly. The proposed rear toilet extension rises 1.1 meters above boundaries and creates an overbearing enclosure 3.7 meters high for 57 Hillgate Place, resulting in a significant loss of sunlight between 8 a.m. and noon. And the 12 and 13 centimeter side gaps between the boundary brick walls are tiny and present obvious environmental health hazards for numerous evident reasons. The gully is also positioned directly above the rear boundary wall. Councillor Catherine Fawkes lodged an objection after she visualised the significant contextual impact and intrusion of the second-storey extension. But as a conclusion committee, I therefore respectfully urge the committee to refuse the application and to protect the heritage integrity of the Hillgate Village Conservation Area specifically. I hope we've brought across the points that we were concerned about here.
Thank you. Okay, so questions to the objector. Okay, I'll start. I must admit, I'm struggling a little bit, and maybe Ms. Ray can help us with this. I'm just struggling to really visualize what this thing, it's really unclear from what's in the pack, and even with the pictures, is it acceptable to ask for an explanation before we ask the objector, or can we do that?
Yes,
Because I do have questions here, but I just want to make sure that we're all very clear what this is.
Yeah, I'll stick to just explaining
Information.
rather than answering questions,
Okay,
so
thank
that I
you.
don't take away from the objector's time. So there's the best thing to probably look at, as I describe it, is the site photographs. So this is an image in the middle of the gap between the two closet wings at the back of Hillgate Place. And they want to infill that area with a new extension set between the closet wings. And then behind that, they would retain this area of terrace in the right-hand photograph in use. The second part of the rear extension, or the second addition, is on the other side. In this location here, you can just see those bikes up against the wall. In that location, there is another rear extension, another structure off the back of that wall of a different design. So that image on the right shows you where both structures would be positioned at the rear. So if we go to the plan, this shows them again. So this is where those bikes are in the photo, in the bottom kind of right area where that new toilet is proposed.
Right.
And the infill extension is where that sort of dining table internally is proposed. So the retained area of terraced sits behind there. That's the best way to describe it. Then in terms of the section drawings, you can see here, this is the lower ground floor that's existing, and it's that terrace at the back that they sit above it. So for us it's a single story because there's one level to it, but it sits above that lower ground floor on the section. So hopefully that helps explain it and helps with questions.
Is everybody clear?
The open spaces to be filled in are between the two closet wings, where that new dining table is shown. So that's the existing closet wing of the house at the bottom half, and the neighbours above. And then off the back of the original closet wing, there's that structure there with a toilet and a sink. So, and that open area at the back would be retained.
And then the height, where's the extra story bit going?
So the height is shown on these elevations. It might even be better to look in your pack if you can't see them clearly. But the image on the top left, the second image on the right, shows the two extensions. So the toilet and sink being provided sits below that window, that first floor window there. That's that addition, that toilet addition. And then the infill addition, you can see just there with a more conservatory style with roof light above.
What's the height?
The overall height, I will double check for you and answer my questions if that's okay.
Okay, are we clear? So my question to the objector is, are there any other houses in Hillgate Place that you can see from Kensington Place that bring the extension to the boundary wall?
It would be the first one. It would be as simple as that. Because the characteristic sort of pattern of the Hillgate Village houses is that you have this closet wing that's set back. So even if you're observing from above, and Kensington Place, our houses are set slightly above, so our lower ground floor, we will see their ground floor terrace. Every single one of those houses, their closet wing is set back. There's not one that's taken to the boundary wall. And in all honesty, 10 centimeters from a brick boundary wall is hardly anything. And not to mention the sort of disaster of being able to even attempt to clean in between that. So the answer to your question would be no, it has no precedent at all. And our concern would chiefly be, and as I say, we are reasonable neighbours. We are not. There are multiple extensions in the Hillgate Village area, and predominantly a lot that extend in the lower ground floor for a reasonable portion of the patio gardens that are based there. But having an extension that's already eliminated the lower ground floor, but then fully to the boundary wall on the second level, is something that doesn't have a precedent in the area at all.
No, I've certainly not seen it. Questions? Thank you. We'll move on to questions from Ms. Rose. So I have several. There's quite, in the objection, and you know, a lot of work's gone into this objections, and I'm sure we've all read it very carefully, but I really am concerned about some of the suggestions about the plans not being accurate, the heights not being accurate. Have we checked all of these plans, and are they correct? Or, I mean, you've also seen the objections, you know what they are. Can you comment on some of the comments that have been made on the plans and where there are errors?
Yes, absolutely. I think the two walls that are referred to at different heights are two separate walls. So the image of the bottom right shows you the back wall that backs onto Kensington Place here. I mean, that wall itself, contextual drawings aren't a planning requirement. We wouldn't refuse planning permission for it. That's why officers will go on site to assess that impact of that relationship. But so that is not what we're approving. We're approving the plans submitted and as scaled. But that wall at the back on Kensington Place is a different wall to the one shown here on the top left image. That's the side wall adjacent to the neighbour. So they're two different walls. For the purposes of this planning application, you would be approving, and to answer Councillor Aretti's question on the height, if planning permission was granted, you would be approving the toilet structure to be have an overall height from the very base of the kind of existing deck, if you like, of 2.8 metres, and an overall height of the infill extension, that conservatory style extension shown, of 3 metres. So they are the scalable details that we have.
Can I ask a question on that one? So with the proposed height and the extension, obviously, the objector's place is Kensington Place, I believe. Is that taller than behind, as in the Kensington Place buildings or dwellings?
Not taller than the buildings, but there's a boundary wall set between the two, which the contextual images here show there is a wall, but there's no changes proposed to it. We haven't checked the details and scale of that, so you have to kind of make the assessment on the information that you've got. So it is higher than that rear boundary wall. So you can see that relationship there. It sits above it. So it would be visible over that shared party wall in a similar way to a normal rear extension would rise above the height of the fence. It's the same. It does rise above the back wall that's shared on Kensington Place.
So there will be privacy concern because it's a terrace. Everyone.
So there's already a terrace there. So in terms of overlooking, I think it would be really difficult for us to raise an objection to that because the whole area is used as a terrace now.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks. It's helpful.
Councillor Verboven.
Thank you. We just heard from the objector that such extensions are not a common feature in Hillgate Place. So could you talk me through your thought process on why therefore this application would be acceptable?
Yes, thank you. It's probably helpful again to turn to some images. And I actually think it's right that there aren't lots of examples of that small. There's examples of infill extensions, but there isn't lots of examples of the kind of toilet extension that comes off the back of the closet wing. But in this particular case, this number 55 sits against a property that has a much deeper closet wing. So you can see it in that right-hand side image. It does come further back than other properties. So we've given weight to that kind of that relationship, the fact it's on the end and that there's variation there. So we think that additional rear addition is acceptable. There's a bit more information in there, but we're looking at the kind of the pattern, the grain and the context from an officer's point of view, and that is a planning judgment for members this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. In the pack at 6.5, you talk about this application essentially not complying with CD13 because essentially the extension projects beyond the general rear building line of neighbouring extensions. But then I noticed when you sort of come to balancing in 6.11, you do say the proposal overall complies with policies including CD13. I mean, I was just struggling to understand how can you say overall it complies if you're saying beforehand, strictly speaking, it doesn't comply with the policy for this reason. Thanks.
That's a really good question. So the local plan actually pulls in all different directions. So you quite often have much bigger applications for things like a conversion of a social and community use to flats, and then you have to weigh whether housing need is more important than social and community use. So it's similar on a far more reduced scale. So here you've got quite an explicit policy on extensions that talks about rear building lines, and you have to sort of judge where that is. And so there can be a conflict. You think, yeah, it does go beyond. There's not lots of additions at ground floor behind those closet wings. But then overall, you've got policy CD1, CD2, and the conservation area policies that talk about sort of context, character, how things and buildings and spaces are arranged, the sense of openness between them. So we're also looking at those. And when you look at it in the round, given the modest scale of it and the next door's arrangement, we found it to be compliant with the local plan. If we hadn't found it compliant and we identified harm, then we'd have had to go through a different process of deciding whether there was public benefits and so on. But for this one, when you take the policies in the round that do pull in different directions, we are satisfied it complies with the kind of overarching aims of all the policies. Hope that helps. Thanks.
Thank you. A couple of things. I'm concerned about the impact of, have we done a light and noise assessment after the building is erected? How is that going to affect the neighbors? One, and two, and I'm going to read you a paragraph from an objection. It says, I don't think that the application gives a true representation of the impact of the roof and the rear extension of 55 Hillgate Place, and the officers have failed to assess the context of the impact of privacy of neighbors and the potential long-term conservation damage to long-established boundary lines. Another thing I'm concerned about is it is a conservation area, and it seems like we are just waving that by the wayside.
Thank you. I'll answer on living conditions first. I think we're very comfortable there's no impact on daylight and sunlight, so we haven't asked for a report to demonstrate that. So planning officers are trained to assess daylight and sunlight by looking at the buildings and structures, spaces, and the orientation of the sun. So the infill extension, that infill addition is set between two closet wings. We really don't think there'll be any impact at all. And then the one off the back, it's limited height and size in relation to, again, that's kind of back boundary wall and the way it's built up there. We aren't concerned about that in terms of daylight and sunlight at all. With regard to character and appearance, that's been more of a sort of planning judgment. That's kind of a key issue that we've identified within it. And the conservation area and the impact there has been an important consideration for us.
So I guess just following on from that point, because we've heard from the objector that there isn't another extension on the road that goes all the way to the boundary ward. I mean, I have to say I find that very unusual, and I can't remember a time when I've seen that. So why do you think that's okay?
Again, I'll just probably bring up a drawing just to explain our findings and reasoning on this. So when you go on this site, I haven't been personally, but the officer has, along Hillgate Place, it is quite tight around there. So, you know, there's built form all around you. This particular one, it does go right up to the rear boundary, but it's set off the other side. It retains the kind of sense of openness and space between the buildings, in our opinion. And that's why we're comfortable with it. We're not concerned about that. It's 2 metres by 1.5 metres very roughly, and we're comfortable with that addition, still reading as subordinate, bearing in mind the built form and context. But that's a planning judgment we have made as officers, and it's before you this evening to consider our recommendation and the images you've seen and the objections you've heard.
I just feel that, and Hillgate Village, I know it very, very well. I mean, it is characterised by these closet wings, some with little extensions, but the garden space is definitely a feature of these streets, and I just find it Actually, I find both of them quite odd. I find the one that goes to the boundary wall very strange. And the infill, I know we have infills, but this one just feels bigger than the ones that I've seen in this area. And I read Catherine's objection, which really made me think about this. I mean, I can't find it now, but she talked about these space. Yeah, thank you. What did she say? I thought actually, hang on, I need to get my glasses on. The rear view from these streets is of a green corridor, which is both appreciated and delivers the benefit of privacy and screening from neighbours. The plan is to allow the extension to butt right up to the boundary wall and eliminate the green boundary completely. I mean, that really strikes me, actually, and she knows this area well. It is a feature of this area, and these houses are very tight, and I think anything that takes away and makes it more... Yeah, I mean, it's just there's a real sense of enclosure. I think, actually, I respectfully disagree with you, Fiona, about this. You know, you will be able to see this extension from the garden in Kensington Place. And, yeah, it's a very tight space, and I don't think we should be allowing things that make it feel even more tight. So that's sort of where I am with this. And I think it really is a positive feature of this conservation area, this Hellgate village, to have this rhythm of the green. And I think, you know, we allow this, we're going to lose all of it. So, yeah, I don't think I could agree with this. I agree with you. Any other comments, thoughts, questions?
I also think having the extension all the way to the boundary wall is the utmost extreme. And I don't see the point of it. I mean, if the house is so tight, maybe a bigger house is better.
I have a question, sir. Is that single dwelling overall?
Sorry, yes, single dwelling.
It might be, I might not find the answer, but do you know roughly about how many sort of bedroom house or something? I don't know, it might not be appropriate, but it's good to understand. Thank you.
I don't think I have a full floor plan to show it. I can look it up for you. I'll just see what we've got in the
would you like me to confirm? Okay.
Yeah, I will look it up though. I'll just check. I don't even know if we've got a complete floor plan within it, because the ones in your report pack at the back. Yeah, because they're not actually labelled. If you look at the back, it looks as though, I can only assume because I haven't been there, that there's a living and dining area and a kitchen, and that's at the existing ground floor plan. First floor, I would guess, is 3 bedrooms with central bathrooms. And then there is that existing lower ground floor, which we don't have a floor plan of.
The recommendation from officers is to approve this application. Can those in favour please show? And those against? Okay, so that's... and 1 abstention here. So 4 refusal and 1 abstention.
Great. Just for the purposes of your voting now with someone putting it forward, I think it would be really helpful for you to clarify whether you want us to just say the rear extension, which captures both the infill and the one at the back, or just the extension beyond the rear closet wing that goes up to the back boundary. So that's something for you to decide. But I think it's very clear that whatever rear extension you're refusing, both or the single one, it's tight within its context, eliminates the sense of garden openness at the rear. So I can definitely have a reason for refusal along those lines. I would caution you against a living conditions reason, but character and appearance.
I mean, it's going to be very, very visible from this neighbour.
but seeing it doesn't make it harmful. So because you've got that rear boundary wall, and it rises above it, but by a very minimal amount, with an overall height of 2.8 metres from the base of that deck, I don't think we would be able to support to.
So how high above the wall is it that's going to be seen?
I would, as a guess from the photos and the images, without actually physically measuring it, less than half a metre higher above that one that comes off the back of the closet wing. So I don't think there'll be a loss of light or a sense of enclosure. But if members disagree and want to include that, we can do it. I just would caution you against it.
I just think in this kind of setting, I feel that even half a metre actually has quite a big impact. You know, if it was a long way from it, obviously not. I don't think it's really the height of it. I don't think is particularly in keeping with these houses. I can't really think of situations where, I mean, there probably are some, but I can't think of anywhere that's been done. So I actually have a problem with both of them.
Okay, so once you propose and second, it would just be to understand whether it's both rear extensions or just the extensions off the closet wing in terms of character and appearance, and then a secondary reason for the extension off the back of the closet wing by virtue of its height and proximity adjacent to the rear boundary wall.
Yes. Yes, I think so. Okay.
But it would be great to understand whether that infill extension, you want that to, as a panel, you would like to refuse that as well, or it's just that the one that goes beyond the closet wing?
Yes, I do think so. They don't really have I mean, these houses don't have infill extensions of that size.
Okay.
So
that's really helpful. So if you want to propose and second on those two reasons, I can definitely, if you're happy for me to finalise the wording.
I personally think so, but, yes, you know, okay, it seems we're in agreement. So can we have a proposer? Councillor Idris and Councillor Verboven to second. And the proposal is to refuse the application at, where is it? 55 Hillgate Place. Can those in favour of the proposal please show? Thank you. And one abstention. So 4 in favour, 1 abstention. So that is refused for both of those reasons. Thank you. Is everybody okay to continue? Okay. Now, the next item on the agenda is Adam and Eve Mews. And I'm not sure if the objector, Mr. Taylor, is... Oh, you are here. Okay, good. So we have an objector and an applicant. So, Ms. Ray, please, if you...
Thank you so much.
Are you sure you don't need a break?
No, absolutely fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So the application at 15 Adam and Eve Mews, as you can see from the development description, is for a new basement level, a replacement mansard and external alterations. So here's an aerial image showing Adam and Eve Mews within its context, quite a constrained site down that mews. These are the elevation drawings. To the left it's the existing, and to the right it is proposed. So you can see that new mansard level, how they're treating the front elevation in terms of the windows and doors, and underneath you can see the section through the basement that's proposed. There's a rear elevation drawing showing that replacement mansard, and the section drawings, and again you can just see how the new basement level is shown. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So can we please hear first from the objector, Mr. Taylor?
Thank you. I speak on behalf of a number of residents of Adam and Eve Mews to strongly and formally object to the application, which we believe is an overdevelopment of the property. We acknowledge the property needs refurbishment and are absolutely supportive of that, and a number of the proposals will enhance the site. But we believe the basement excavation to be of excessive scale and in contravention of several planning recommendations. So 25 neighbours have registered formal objections, several of whom are represented here this evening. These are not generalised complaints, they're acute shared concerns in the specific constrained reality of our mews. The planning officer recognised the constrained nature of this. It's a narrow street, there's no pavement, It's heavily used as a public cut-through. There's a nursery school on the street. Many families with small children live there, and we contend that due to the unique constraints of this site, the application fails to satisfy 3 local planning policies. Firstly, the construction activities pose an unacceptable and inherent threat to public safety. In respect of TR1, the draft traffic management plan is flawed. It proposes heavy goods vehicles perform three-point turns at the south T end of the Mews. This is a blind corner directly adjacent to a nursery school. There will be small children and parents, to which it proposes a continuous and unacceptable risk from large reversing vehicles. And the narrowness of the Mews means that the combination of scaffolding, hoarding, and vehicle loading will guarantee blockage of the street for some periods. This is not merely an inconvenience. It threatens the timely access of emergency vehicles. It also may hinder essential services like refuse collection, and the safety failures are inherent in the geometry of the Mews itself. Secondly, we believe it has unmitigable material harm to living conditions in violation of policy CD9. The planning officer relies on generic standards like the considerate constructors scheme. We believe this is insufficient. Multiple neighbours work from home full-time in close proximity to the proposed project, and the likely duration and disruption of a double basement dig out will fundamentally compromise their ability to do so. We also have a new small business directly opposite the property represented here today, and the proposed works may harm that business during the duration of the extended works. We also have a resident who is neurodivergent and previously experienced severe mental health distress from comparable works. We have requested specific site-mandated safeguards, including enforced quiet periods, real-time noise and vibration monitoring, and significant dust damping procedures. The planning officer did not mention these in their report. And then thirdly, in respect of GB12, the application fails to demonstrate compliance with key policies. These are delicate and historic buildings that were not designed to withstand invasive work such as a large basement dig out. We already have significant Thames water issues around number 15. The risk of structural damage, ground movement, and water table disruption has not been, in our opinion, adequately addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'm sorry you're really over time. I'm sure we will have questions, but thank you. Okay. Let's hear now from the applicant, Mr. Proctor.
Thank you.
Well, you have a bit over 3 minutes, actually, nearly 4 if you want to have extra time.
Yeah, my name is Christopher Proctor. I'm the owner of 15 Adam and Eve Mews. I purchased the property, which, as has been highlighted, is in very poor state of repair. For myself, my partner Felicity, my 2 daughters, Lily and Nola, and my dog. We want to make it our long-term family home. I've lived in the borough for over 15 years. I live and work locally in Notting Hill. I care deeply about the area and its character. My aim is simply to restore and modernise this neglected property sensitively, not to alter the charm of the Mews, but to preserve and to enhance it. Before submitting the application, I met with the planning officer and took on board their feedback to make sure our proposals were in keeping with neighbouring buildings in height, scale and materials. It is clear from your planning officer's report he supports the proposed refurbishment and extension of our home and has kindly recommended it for approval. I thought I'd summarise his own comments that he felt our design preserved the character and appearance of the individual building. The submission has considered the structural stability of the application and the relevant neighbouring buildings to comply with the requirement of the Council's basement policy and guidance. Subject to conditions, the proposed development would also safeguard the living conditions of the occupiers of neighbouring properties. The construction method statement that has been submitted and the draft construction management programme are acceptable. Conditions are recommended to address the concerns that have been raised. I understand and respect there have been some objections. but most of these relate to temporary construction matters rather than the design itself. We've prepared a construction method statement and traffic management plan showing how disruption, vehicle movement and noise will be kept to a minimum. My professional team, who is here by my side, will keep neighbours informed throughout the process and will provide clear site contacts so concerns can be dealt with quickly. We plan to start work as soon as consent is granted to prevent the building deteriorating even further. This is not a speculative project, it's our future home. We want to create a safe, well-designed space to raise our girls and be part of the Mews community for years to come. It would make no sense for us to get off on the wrong foot with our neighbours, and we'll do everything we can to maintain good communication and respect throughout. To that effect, we have kept our neighbours informed with letters and in person. I hope you can see we have sought to submit a very well considered and sensitive piece of architecture that greatly enhances the street, but also ensures its longevity as a future home within Kensington and Chelsea. Thank you for your time and for considering our application. I hope you'll support your office's recommendations to approve our plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions? Any questions? Councillor Oretti.
Question to the applicant, Mr. Proctor. Your mansard, obviously the basement is not visible from outside. In terms of the mansard roof, could you give us an example of any similar structure within that Mews, please?
Yeah, there's a property called Treetops, which is on the same Mews that has a double basement. Just to correct, sorry, I didn't get your name. This is a single basement, which would constitute a lower ground floor in a normal property. This is not a double basement. It is essentially adding a lower ground floor to an existing property. The other property in question had a lower ground floor and a double basement.
What number is that again? Sorry.
Number, bear with me, I've written it down, 64 Adam and Eve Mews.
64. Thank you. Question.
May I clarify?
Objector, yeah. Just a counter question. Obviously, if I understand the basement wise, there's structural issues, which we understand that. Obviously, that's not a planning consideration. It's more of a building regulation. If there's a similar sort of mansard roofs, why would this be any different in view of objecting? Thank you.
The Mews is divided into two with parallel streets. I believe I'm not aware of the other basement, but I believe it's on the second parallel stretch, which is effectively separate to the street on which we live, and the street on which we live is the thoroughfare from High Street Kensington through to Allen Street. The other section of the street is very separate.
Is that because you said number 64?
Number 64, it's also called Treetops. You can see when it was purchased, there's a brochure available. In terms of the access is exactly the same in the sense that you enter the Mews from either High Street Kensington or the opposite end of the Mews. So I really don't feel that's a fair justification for any difference in terms of the application. I think the difference here is that ours is much less significant. We are looking at a single story, not a double story underground. We are working within the envelope of the building, and we are maintaining the roof height. We've gone at great lengths to ensure that we don't do anything that will disrupt the streetscape. We haven't submitted a roof garden like every other single Mews house along the street. In fact, the neighbouring properties all have roof terraces. We haven't gone for one of those because we want to be sensitive to the neighbours to the rear. We're a growing family. I have 2 children. My partner and I are looking to have more children. The house as it stands right now is in a really poor state. It's been empty now for quite some time. I would actually argue that it's more of concern leaving it as it is.
I get your answer. That should be sufficient for my question. Thank you.
Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the objector. You made the point that lots of residents work from home in the Mews and noise and construction work could be disruptive. I suppose my challenge to you would be that it is a central London area, pretty close to a high street. Obviously, there's lots of advantages to living in central London. Would it not be fair to say that one of the downsides is obviously is very urban and there is going to be construction noise going on, and that's part and parcel of living in a big global city? Do you agree or not, and could you just explain that further? Thanks.
As I said, I'm absolutely supportive of the redevelopment of the property. It needs redevelopment. We accept the disruption caused by that redevelopment, but the basement itself will significantly elongate that. It will result in a significant increase in the number of heavy goods vehicles that are required to access the mews, and it will prolong a painful process unnecessarily.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. So, I mean, your concerns about the vehicles moving through the mews, as long as there's a clearly targeted construction management plan submitted, where probably the size of the vehicles could be reduced, presumably, I don't know, something the officers could help us. Would you be happy with that? So that we can ask the officers or the chair to bring the CTMP back to the committee?
I guess my challenge would be the narrow nature, the lack of pavement, the nursery school on the mews, make it inherently very challenging to prepare an acceptable traffic management plan. The applicant, I believe, has had every opportunity to submit one, and I don't believe the draft one is appropriate. And there hasn't been a final one on which you can give an opinion. So I find it challenging for you to be able to opine on that.
Actually, let's ask the applicant about the CTMP and what work you've done on it, and if you can answer this point about the 3-point turn. I mean, look,
Yeah,
and I'd just say that about these basements, I mean, we all know what this is like. We've all lived with them, we all have them, we've seen them. But they are, as long as they're compliant, and we'll speak to the officer, they are, acceptable. And there will always be a way. I mean, I suppose there probably are some exceptional circumstances where CTMPs can't be developed. I can think of one. And this street is tight, but it's not that tight. There is no pavement. Anyway, sorry. About the CTMP, what work have you done on it? And do you think it's acceptable in its current state? And what changes, if any, would you be making to it?
I think it's worth noting that my company is a design development company. We've completed 80 projects across Kensington, Chelsea, and Westminster. We are very experienced at managing refurbishments of listed buildings, both on Eaton Square, which is far more complex in terms of the neighbourly issues that we find in other parts of London. We are a professional outfit with structural engineers appointed, architects appointed, project managers appointed. There'll be a site foreman on site every single day. This is being done from my home, so I take even greater care and pride that the neighbourly matters are adhered to, so that long term I'm going to have my kids can also go down the street and enjoy the nursery. I mean, I'm a parent of 2. I'm planning on having more children as well, so they will be using that.
But what do you think about the CTMP as it currently is?
I think we've had a draft construction management document put together that's been submitted at the request of the planning officer, so you could see that. We've specifically been told that it would be conditioned for the exact point that's being raised, which is to ensure that everything is taken into consideration, whether it's where the vehicle would turn if it ever needed to turn. The great thing about that location is there is an entry point and an exit point. There is no need to turn. I think they're labouring on something that actually, in reality, would never come to fruition. You enter from this side, you leave from that side. There is no pavement there because it's not a pedestrianised street. There is definitely space for 2 trucks to go up and down the street because I've seen people park their cars and allow traffic to pass. I don't think there'd ever be a case where it'd be blocked. The hoarding would be enclosed right up against the building, and any works to the basement, I think, would probably extend the programme by 3 months, which in the grand scheme of a development of this scale, which is a building that is falling down, frankly, I don't think that's excessive. And I think more importantly, we're sort of ensuring and enhancing that for the next 20 years, that building is going to be in good stead. We're not the first people to be refurbishing their properties on this muse. If you look at the streetscape, you'll see just how much has been done to that muse without much consideration to the architecture, without much consideration to how one varies to the other. And I think what we've tried to do is be conservative in our approach with the building and sensitive to the historic setting that it sits within. I feel that with the support of the council and the sort of guidance of the planning officers around conditions, that it would be only fair to approve an application such as this.
But just going back to the CTMP, are you satisfied with it in its current form, or will you...
I am satisfied with it,
You are.
And it's been done under the guidance of a professional team who've done similar projects to this. We're currently doing a project for another client actually, which is very similar. It's a muse, and so muses are similar in nature in terms of the width, and of course it goes without saying that enabling matters are something that are so important to monitor and adhere to. And that's why there's certain restrictions in terms of noisy works when they can happen and when they can't happen. And that's why those rules are in place to ensure that that doesn't cause an excessive nuisance to people.
Okay, thank you.
I would say the applicant has had every opportunity to submit a full and final CTMP and also a full and final drainage management plan. There is not a final traffic management plan, and the planning officer has said that the drainage management plan is inadequate. So despite the assertions to the positive on that, I would also say that the proposed traffic management plan, as I said, has heavy goods vehicles turning in the muse, despite the assertion that you can go straight in and out. And as I said, there is a nursery school in close proximity to those turnings. And in respect of the neighbourly conduct that the gentleman alluded to, I would note that we've had no direct communication in respect of this. I haven't received any of the neighbourliness that I would have expected or that was alluded to. And I think that is potentially indicative of behaviour during the project going forward and part of the reason for our concerns about the proposed basement.
We'll start. Mr. Ray, so look, we've already talked about basements, how disruptive they are, and we know that if they are done within our policies, they are acceptable. So, I mean, I've read all of this very carefully. It looks compliant to me in terms of a basement. Would you agree with that? I think you would agree with it because you...
Yes, yeah, we're recommending approval. I'd really, if you don't mind, I'd just like to talk about the CTMP slightly, because it is
We definitely want to talk about that, but I'm just trying to make sure that we know that the basement, as it's presented, is compliant. It's not a reason to refuse this. It's compliant with our policies, and we understand the disruption to neighbours, and there's a lot of objections here, 20 objections, so it's a lot. People are concerned. So yes, let's talk about the CTMP, and if we were minded to go with the recommendation, what can be done to help the people in this muse and the objector?
I think the CTMP as submitted, it is correct that the submitted one we've got, we don't think is good enough. So we wouldn't sign that off as the final CTMP, which is why we've got a condition. But we always have that condition anyway. So even when somebody has a perfect construction traffic management plan, we always put that condition on, because what we want is when people are about to build to have the most up-to-date current site situation, because other developments happen. Things are happening all the time in the borough, so we want to know that they've taken account of everything. They've engaged with all their neighbours because someone else may have moved in. So that condition is always going to be important. But more importantly, I think, is the transport team have reviewed that CTMP, and whilst they've said it's unacceptable, they think there will be a safe solution. So the final CTMP should hopefully deal with that and give them comfort.
Okay, and I know this is all quite technical, and CTMPs these days are hugely detailed, and you know, it's quite difficult to get a CTMP approved by the transport team. But do you know what their issues with it were in terms of it being inadequate?
I actually just had another look. So what they've said is, it doesn't use, one of the things is it doesn't use our standard pro forma. So because we've kind of led the way with basements on being strict in terms of how we manage them, how we watch them, we actually have a pro forma that they have to fill out and make commitments within. I will use narrow-bodied vehicles in an area like this. The times you have things delivered, given there's a nursery school, that kind of thing, will all be set out, and that makes it really enforceable. So if someone doesn't comply with it, we have a means of doing a stop notice or taking action against them and dealing with that issue. So that's one of the key things that we would need them to do. We've also asked for certain drawings to show how things turn and details of vehicle routing. And they've also said the applicant should examine other CTMPs for the street and look for best practice. So there are other basements that have been approved down here, and thankfully gone are the days when it didn't even require permission to do this kind of work.
Thank you, Chair.
Can you turn your mics on?
Oh.
Thanks. My initial thought, based on what we've read and heard, is I think the basement itself doesn't contravene our own planning policies. We can only refuse things if there are reasons under the law and our planning policies to refuse them. However, I think in relation to the CTMP, I do empathise with how significant this construction is. And I think we would need a sort of rock-solid CTMP in order for something like this to go ahead. So I think that's my initial view, but keen to hear the thoughts of others.
We have seen cases where the CTMP actually comes back to committee, so maybe that is the condition that we add to this particular case, and if that's the case, I'm happy to approve that.
Yes, we have seen cases like that. What do you think it would add here? I'm not being provocative, but I think we should only do that if we think we've got something to add. And I don't think this is a particularly look, I completely understand that there's lots of people living this muse. They love it. It's, you know, it's a very special place. But in terms of the access, it's not particularly difficult. I mean, I get the nursery and all this, but we do have very professional officers who look at these things day in, day out.
For me, it's a combination of the high level of objections combined with having a nursery there, and therefore there are certain sensitivities. We haven't seen a final version of the CTMP yet, and therefore, because of all that combined, I am completely in favor of the planning regarding the building. That looks absolutely fine to me. But to address concerns locally and the local situation, I think it is worth having the CTMP come back to the committee because of that.
Okay. What does everyone else think?
I agree with you. Not every CTMP needs to come back, especially if we know. And the officers, we had this discussion, they've heard everything we talked about, and they know and understand what our concerns are. But I also see where Tim is coming from. It's just to kind of like alleviate any pressures for the community, for the neighbors, and just give them that extra layer of confidence that we have done everything possible to make your life as easy as possible with a development right at your backyard. But I don't, I'm really not too bothered whether it comes back, because I know the officers will put everything in place, including smaller vehicles, frequencies, all that.
Sorry. 20 objections is a lot. There is public interest, there is concern. And if we feel that that's enough, then I'm happy to bring it. But it's also time, and it's time for the applicant, and it's committee time, and it's officer time. And Ms. Rowe, what?
I have an idea that might help.
Okay.
Just listening to you, and sorry to disturb. We could tighten the condition slightly, because it is our standard condition. And the things that you're concerned about, size of vehicles and so on, they are kind of caught by point C, but we could be explicit and say include size. And similarly with point I, we could refer to the nursery, so details and measures to protect pedestrians and other highway users, and the nursery, just so that there's that focus, drawn attention to it. That's just a suggestion, and I'll leave that with you if you are conflicted in that decision.
Look, I'm happy to bring it back. I think that's helpful. I think we just really have to think about what a committee is going to add to it. And I just don't think this is... the public interest point, I think, is an important one. So this is a lot. This is a lot. And on that basis, maybe we should... I don't know, what does everybody else think?
I think there is a point in relation to the CTMP, although I do, Chair, take your point as well, that I think we should only be bringing things back to committee if that committee can add to it. And what I wonder is, what in addition to the discussion we're having here tonight, would a future committee be able to add to that? So I'm on balance, I think I'm minded that we either approve or refuse the application in its entirety, but that's just my personal view.
Do you think about Ms. Ray's suggestion about being very specific about that condition?
Yes, I think that would help. I think just because of the nature of this application, how extensive it is, I think the greater levels of specificity we can have is probably helpful.
Okay, so do you want to bring it back or not? I'm really on the fence about it, because I think Councillor Verboven's made very good points about public interest. I think so.
I don't think we can take care of it here now, because we don't have the final version in front of us.
I mean, what do you think? You have to decide. We've got, I mean...
Sorry, Chair. I think it's very finely balanced.
Yes,
I can see both sides and both views. I think on balance, my view is not to take it back to committee, but I think it's a it's a finely balanced view. I don't have that view as a strong view. I think just on balance, that's my view.
I think that probably is my view as well. I think it is. So we'll add, I think, what Fiona's suggesting. And we all understand, you know, what this is and the disruption that it causes, and it is about allowing people to develop their homes, which is their right to, whilst being concerned for our residents and our neighbours. I mean, the CTMP is quite a difficult condition to fulfil, and especially with some added, you know, specific conditions for, you know, this location. So I feel that our officers are able to deal with it. We're never going to make the thing go away, because it's, you know, it's a building site and it's going to be noisy. But I'm not sure what bringing it back adds. So anyway, that's where I am. Shall we move to a vote? Any other comments, thoughts? So we will add to that condition, and we will delegate to officers with the CTMP. And the recommendation is to approve the planning application at 15 Adam and Eve Mews. Can those in favour please show? And those against? Okay, so that is approved with one voting against. Thank you. Yes. Yes. start the meeting, and let's move to Chepstow Villas. Now, there's no presentation. Can I request that you put up a picture of the rear of the property, please, for us to discuss, because I have some questions.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, I'm not sure if I've got it on this PowerPoint to show you. Let me just check whether it's in the report pack.
Do we have it anywhere? I've seen it.
Yeah, I've shown it to you.
Yes.
But it's in the submissions you would have seen.
Yeah.
But I don't have it on.
I can see someone raising their hand, but I've got it, but
Yeah.
I don't think I can.
I don't have it on the
from them.
PowerPoint. The best image might be the existing rear elevation, which is in the.
Look, the reason I'm asking about this is because I did see it, and I think it's quite attractive.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the crux of this application is really about what the situation is with the back of this building. So my first question for you, and it'd be really helpful if we can find an image of this, is I was a bit confused about the submission from the Pembridge Association and what I read in the report. It wasn't clear to me what changes had been made to the rear of the building. So because that really, if it hasn't been altered, then I think we need to talk about the extension at the back. But if it has, I think I would be much more open to it. So can you help us understand, please?
Absolutely. In the back of your pack, the second drawing is the existing rear elevation. So you'll be able to see it there. And it is an attractive rear elevation. The brickwork's there. It's got, traditionally detailed windows and so on. But it's not an original rear wall. So the 1982 permission that is referred to in paragraph 4.4 involved rebuilding and altering that wall when they converted it into flats some time ago. So it's an attractive rear elevation, but not original. And there's other kind of clues as to why it's not original, because there's like a stretcher bond there. And they referred to that in their applicant submission, so you may have seen that in your preparation. The heritage statement explains that as well. But I've actually seen the drawings and the officer report from the 82 permission that talks about that wall being completely replaced. Yeah, I think it's still attractive. So the bricks and detailing is still attractive. However, I think the proposed rear additions are subordinate enough to it. You can, they're finished in a similar brickwork. It's a more regular arrangement of fenestration, but it's not sort of out of character, in my opinion, from the established character of that part of the conservation area. So it's a change, but I think those additions are subordinate.
I mean, it's a change that several of them have. I mean, they have these rear extensions.
Yes, I mean, it is quite altered along Chepstow Villas because they're big homes in big plots.
Yes.
They lend themselves to adding to and altering.
Just so I don't miss this, is there anything worth preserving at the rear? What you're saying there is, but that this rear extension would be sympathetic to it. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly it. I think the exposed brickwork at the back is definitely an attractive feature we should preserve, and that's very characteristic. But changing the windows and adding sympathetic extensions, we are very comfortable with in this part.
Okay. And just from the Pembridge Association, from Fiona Fleming-Brown, she talks about this Article 4 directive, which I found strange. What is, well, I know what it is. I mean, I know what an Article 4 directive is, but is there one here? And what does she mean?
So the Article 4 restrictions take away the rights to do things under permitted development. So they need planning permission for everything they've applied for here. Because of that Article 4 direction, and they can apply to different things. I can get it up, the exact wording of what this one is, but I would very much trust what Fiona Fleming-Brown says in the Pembridge Association. But that doesn't mean you can't apply for it. So what it just means is we have control over whatever that Article 4 direction says, and then we have to consider whether it preserves or enhances.
Okay. I mean, she's saying it's unusually well preserved at the rear, but the rear's been completely altered. So I'm not sure what she's getting at.
I mean, I think it is an attractive rear elevation, but it's not a surviving original rear facade. We've got evidence for that from the 82 permission. I actually looked at it this afternoon just to triple check, and the officer's report talks about it being rebuilt. And the officer's report actually says, we know it's been implemented because it says works are underway as well. So in that 82 file, we've got that information. And then there are other clues when you look at it more closely as a result about sort of the bond of the brick that wouldn't have been characteristic of that period of building.
And she talks about the overly large extensions. Are they large compared to what's nearby? Is there anything unusual about them?
I think they are generous. When you look at the section drawing, they are generous. They give, additional spaces and rooms, but I still think they read as subordinate to that main house. They're set over the two lower levels. They're not full width. The more modern fenestration, the sort of glass sliding doors are set at that lower level, so they're more hidden in terms of wider conservation area views. So I think that's why we're comfortable with it, and we have no concerns about the conservation area impact.
Okay, thank you. It's very helpful. Any other?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question to officers, just in relation to in the pack, I know you say the building's undergone extensive rear alterations in the past and the existing roofscape has been altered previously. To what extent do those previous alterations mean that under the planning rules there's greater support for allowing a further application to alter the building?
I think if we had the original rear facade, it would really be something special. To be honest, we have refused things like that before, where there is an original rear facade, and we don't actually get a lot of support on appeal, because they don't want to be seen, I think, to being so prescriptive no one can do anything to their buildings. It's more about the overall impact of it. But here I think we have to give weight to the fact that that facade has been rebuilt, the roof is new, well, not new, of its time, and look at it sort of more contextually. So we've got really heavy alterations at 17, 19, and along that group. So I don't think this will look out of character.
Councillor Idris.
Question is, there is a lot of talk in all the objections about overdevelopment. Are they just copying and pasting the objections, or is there a sense of overdevelopment?
I think that's a valid objection, an opinion from someone who's reviewed it. They're probably thinking, when you compare the additions to what's there, they've got, a roof, a rear, and so on. But I mean, sometimes we see lots of different, you will know from your experience, lots of different applications come in for lots of different things. This is hopefully a comprehensive package showing us what we're going to get as a result of this development. So there is a lot all in one go, but I don't think it's a harmful overall, given the context.
I was worried about this back wall. It is attractive, but I think I'm kind of happy with the answer that we've got from Fiona. So I think I'm comfortable with this. Everyone happy to move to a vote? Okay, so the recommendation is to approve the application at 19 Chepstow Villas. Can those in favour please show? Thank you, so that one is approved. Let's crack straight on to Chelsea Sports Centre, one of our buildings. Actually, I have some questions about this. So I'm very familiar with this. I used to have swimming lessons there when I was a child. I'm very familiar with this roof. It's obviously listed. The roof is listed. And we're now going to have this double glazing in the roof. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you've thought about this, double glazing is a change from the original, and just tell us why you're comfortable with this proposal, please.
I think the key thing for the heritage officer when reviewing is, I think it was replaced in the 70s, a very original lantern. So it's not as a result of it being replaced, it won't be historic fabric that's going. It's something from the 70s that's going. And the significance of the building and, you know, the addition will still be there because it's important. So they were comfortable with the replacement as long as the replacement was sensitive, which has been achieved here. And there's a public benefit also to weigh, even if you do identify harm, which I'm not sure you would, but even if you did, that there is a, you know, energy sustainability argument there for that double glazing, especially in a pool. So strong recommendation to approve that one.
Let's move to a vote then. So the recommendation is to approve the application of the double glazing at Chelsea Sports Centre. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that one is approved. Oh yes, listed building consent, yes. So we also have listed building consent, and the recommendation is to approve the listed building application. So can those in favour please show? Thank you. Areti? No? Okay. All right. So that listed building consent is given. Next up, we've got Sloane Street, which is the installation of the non-illuminated banner. Quite large, but temporary. Anyone got any thoughts, objections? Quite large? No? Okay. Straightforward? Okay, we'll move to a vote. It's non-illuminated. It's non-illuminated. Okay, so the recommendation is to approve the advertising consent at 30 to 33 Sloane Street. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. That one is approved. And Rabbit Row. So this I found very interesting. And I really did have quite a big problem with these windows that they talk about, but they're not part of the application. Explain, please.
Yeah, exactly that. I think the original application included new windows. They must have seen the objections, or neighbours got in touch and they amended the drawings to completely remove it. But because the objections haven't been withdrawn, officers still need to bring it to you to make the decision. But hopefully all the concerns overcome and resolved.
Solar panels and the glazing on the roof.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we've updated the development description as well to remove any reference to the windows.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So let's move to a vote. Can those in favour of the application at 8 Rabbit Row please show? Thank you. So that one is approved, and I think that is our final case. So that concludes our business. Thank you very much, Ms. Rowe. I think you've earned your money today. Thank you very much. Thank you, committee, and have a good evening.